research review. Can AI do novel security research? Meet the HTTP Terminator. So this is the long-awaited big Kettle's research of the year. So I missed the DEF CON talk of it. I wasn't there for Black Hat. And I've not read it yet, which is hilarious. Because I probably should have read this. But, of all the ones to read, this is probably one of them. But yeah, so this should be really interesting. I don't know how HTTP works. You would never catch me using HTTP. Definitely not getting caught red-handed. I know some things. I like the concept of the funny behaviors with the kettled illegal HTTP2 headers with carriage returns or line feeds in them. I don't understand all of the various ways that proxies can disagree, and you can have funny behaviors and you can have smuggle. I don't understand, dude. I understand the impact, but I don't understand how to make the stars align, and it's just a lot of layers, man, and it's quite often very black box, and it's not particularly fascinating to me. The research is crazy. I wish I could appreciate it more. But I think the interesting part here is going to be, what I'm interested in is, this is just a case study for thought amplification via AI, which, I'm in a bit of a AI hole right now with just a lot of spend all the tokens, get all the bugs. But yes, so I want cool ideas. Let's do cool ideas. I'm ready to have some sick ideas, so hopefully that's what this is about. Abstract. We all know AI can find bugs. Oh yeah, and also I think this information is likely I think it would have been a lot more interesting if this had dropped in its earliest form, and I think it would have been something that would have been crazier at the time, because April or something this was teased. I feel like a lot of the ideas here, just remember that a lot of this stuff dates back to then, and think about how revolutionary it would have been then, because we've seen a lot happen in the last 4 months. But I don't know, it's still going to be sick. I know it's going to be great, and I'm sure there's been plenty of updates to whatever. We all know AI can find bugs. After a decade of research, I asked a harder question: can an autonomous system invent new attack techniques and use them to hack live websites at scale? Well, you're the director of research, so you better go direct that AI. Building this sounded like a bad idea, so I did it. Yeah, that does sound like a hard thing to have to answer for. It worked. I'll share an arsenal of new HTTP desync triggers, gadgets, and exploits that compromise bank security solutions and government infrastructure. Then I'll trace each discovery chain back through the HTTP Terminator, showing how to turn your personal expertise into an autonomous weapon, and the dark arts required to make it lethal. Yeah. I'll also share discoveries from beyond the autonomy horizon, some only reachable with a tight human-AI research loop, and others beyond AI's reach entirely. These include a powerful undisclosed recon technique and anomalies that hint at new attack classes offering alternative paths to critical impact. Dude, that's what I'm here for. I want the... Yeah, alright. I'm excited. I'll analyze the discovery process, sharing detailed experiments that probe the boundaries of what AI can and can't discover. You'll leave with new exploits from desync triggers to undisclosed attack classes, and a blueprint for turning your instincts into an autonomous research cascade. And yes, I'll open source the HTTP Terminator. This white paper is also available as a printable PDF. If you've seen the size of the scroll bar, you're about to ask for an AI summary, you may prefer to read the executive summary instead. This research was presented at Black Hat USA 2026 DEF CON 34. This page will be updated with the recording once it's available, following Portswigger research on X, LinkedIn, or RSS to get notified when it's linked. Yeah, okay. Contents. This is interesting that Cascade's a layer. We'll get into all of it, I guess. I don't know. I have to do this because I have to know what's going on, because you gotta know what's going on, man. That's the whole... Alright, introduction. Automation is often focused on efficiency, but I believe that when it's approached just right, automation can enable outcomes that were previously impossible. This research is about chasing that promise of something more. Yeah, that is a very fascinating subject in general. The primary objective of this project was to discover the new frontier of automation-driven security research. Oh man, I've been practicing automation-driven research for a long time and could see that generative AI had moved the frontier substantially. I also aimed to build a blueprint to help other researchers quickly adopt this new approach. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are just starting to click right now. My secondary My secondary objective was to push the fully autonomous research concept to complete failure by exceeding the capability of current state-of-the-art models. By doing this, I aim to show where a human in the loop can still add significant value as opposed to just building the loop then stepping back. Finally, I aim to discover factors that make a research topic unsuitable for an AI-driven approach. Yeah, that's... I'm sure you want to feel... I'm sure everybody wants to feel like they're still needed. Which, I have... obviously, that's true. But sometimes, I don't know, it's always good to see evidence of it beyond, like, the primitives we're working with. This would be valuable to people who prefer to stick with a classic, fully manual research approach and want to minimize the risk of collision with an AI-enhanced researcher. That's true. Defining a novel HTTP desync research. We've all seen experts claiming AI can't do original security research. One of the many risks of my project was that people might claim that the system's discoveries weren't actually original. To minimize this risk, I chose the topic I was most qualified for, HTTP desync attacks. You also have to keep in mind that he's probably also most qualified for this meta topic of can AI do security research, because, like, I don't know, he's kind of, he's got a lot of, like, meta security research experience as far, like, you can't be the director of security research at Portswigger, like, that always produces all this cutting edge research and not have, like, meta, director, direct the AI, go, find the new ideas to find the security impact. There we go. / goal. Okay, I repopularized this attack class back in 2019, and in total I've done 4 years of research on it, resulting in 4 Black Hat USA and DEF CON presentations. So, yeah, yeah. If you're not familiar with this attack class, I recommend checking out the research above or our Web Security Academy topic. That said, here's the brief primer. HTTP desync attacks are possible when websites funnel HTTP requests over a shared HTTP1 connection to the backend. The weak request isolation in HTTP 1.1 means that an attacker who triggers a desync can alter other people's requests. Yeah, it's such a cool... Yeah. This enables various attacks, including response queue poisoning, which makes websites lose track of which response is intended for which user, meaning the attacker gets sent responses for other live users of the site, often including live credentials like session cookies and API keys. Yeah. I wish that would happen to me. I would define novel HTTP desync research as discovering novel desync triggers, e.g. expect 100 continue, novel desync patterns, e.g. VH, novel desync classes, e.g. 0.cl, novel desync weaponization techniques and enhancement, e.g. RQP, the head gadget, with 2 further caveats. Desync triggers vary a lot in originality and value in general. If a single novel trigger works on multiple different HTTP servers, that's a great sign. It's a significant research discovery rather than a one-off implementation bug. Yeah, that's... Because, like, I would be so... If I was looking into this, I'd be, like, so implementation specific. Because it's, like, I would want to be working from, like, let's have a concrete example and let's try to figure out what's going on here versus the wide, crazy spraying that, like, James is known to do. Which is... oh, man. They don't... Yeah. Alright, desync attacks rely on a combined behavior of a front-end and back-end server. This means it's quite easy to point AI at a server code base and have it spit out original vectors that have minimal value because they don't work in any realistic deployment setup. For me, it's just a research lead until it's proven on a live third-party website. Though what's interesting is if you did collect a ton of these, right, for various combinations of things, and then built some awful scanner to throw it at his database of live targets that he's known to maintain, that could be very interesting. Okay, here we go. Okay, I like this. HTTP Terminator design. I based the design of the HTTP Terminator on my own research methodology. Okay, ideation, evaluation, weaponization, but then you just have this cascade layer that makes the chart meaningless. Like, what is that? Is that... okay. There's a lot of orange squiggly lines in a cascade, so that's... I guess that's like orchestration throughout the process. I don't know. The initial phase is ideation, inventing hypotheses, aka potential techniques. This step is crucial, but it's only a tiny part of the process. The next phase is evaluation, testing hypotheses to see which ones actually work. The HTTP Terminator does this using live websites where testing is authorized via bug bounty program or via DP. Next, there's weaponization, joining the dots from a proven hypothesis to proven security impact and reportable vulnerabilities specific websites. Finally, there's the cascade, using each proven hypothesis as fuel for more discoveries. That's such a... You don't get to put that in one box. Like, that could be, like, variant analysis, that could be patch bypass, that could be, it gets into, like, bigger, like, higher level concepts that are trickier to quantify, but this is the step I've always performed without thinking, while massively underestimating its importance. This year, the HTTP Terminator's logging of the complete discovery chain behind each finding proved how critical it is. Okay, we'll see what this means, because I'm still not... This is such a... How, you know, what is the... and I guess that is the how, you know, it's, yeah, you know, it's always like, oh man, you can do this, oh man, what if you could do that? But yeah, so... Yeah, okay, yeah, I think I just described the cascade, yeah. Just the deluge of ideas. I'll restructure the rest of the paper around these phases. Okay, so the cascade phase is going to be heavy. The structure is broadly applicable to other research topics, and I'll focus on most transferable takeaways throughout. I've included some extra advice on how to design this type of system at the end. Cool. Ideation. To kick off the research, we need the system to autonomously generate hypotheses. In this context, a hypothesis is simply an idea or technique that might work. It must be testable so we can find out if it actually does work. Here's a few examples. Desync trigger hypothesis. The method post makes some servers ignore the request body. Desync pattern hypothesis. A malformed header makes some servers ignore subsequent headers. Weaponization hypothesis. Adding the expect to a smuggled request bypasses RQP defenses. The technique rediscovery test. I wanted to explore strategies to make LLMs better at hypothesis generation. So the first step was to find a task that the best models found genuinely challenging. To do this, I tested whether AI could invent a technique that I'd already invented and evaluated myself but never published. Ah, yes, the forbidden Kettle's HTTP desync. Oh, Lord. Yeah, I don't even... That's, I'm sure there's so much cool research that goes unpublished. For the test, and it's probably like such minor gadgets, but still, it's... If you... yeah. All right. For the test, I used a black box reverse engineering strategy for detecting input transformations by front-end servers. The protocol ruler technique. Okay, this is so cool. I love those like black box oracle. Like honestly, if you can chain enough black box oracles together that are like general enough for understanding application code, I think you could. Like I have a lot of ideas. Like omniscience AI, where it is able to perform all these oracle techniques and divine so much information and build so much context about the back end that it is... Alright, whatever, sorry. Some researchers can do that, but I want like a framework for that almost. Alright, almost all servers have a header length limit. If a request exceeds it, you get a different response. When a front end transforms input, this typically changes the length of the byte sequence. This means we can use the back end's length limit as a ruler to measure which header values and byte sequences get transformed and by how much. In this example, we can see that the length limit is 64040. So, is this a header? It's a big header. Okay. Are these two requests? What? Yes, okay. However, if we swap out 2A's for a 2-byte sequence, CO8A, we hit the limit at 6403. This shows the 2-byte sequence has been expanded by 10 bytes. Okay, so... This strategy can unveil multiple interesting behaviors, including value rewriting of IP spoofing headers. Wow, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, header dropping and overriding. Yeah, how Unicode is being handled, which can lead to desync phones. Okay, this is actually super interesting on its own. Like, just because like I mean, there's even times when like from the other side of the house when you're trying to get devs to like fix something or fix some. Maybe add MTLS auth to some more routes, but they don't even understand how many proxies their application is behind. And it's like, dude, how do you not even know how your application is deployed? It's like, wow, you might even be able to do like interesting black box estimates about how the application is deployed, just via tricks like this. This is so cool. And it's like, we aren't even to the making the AI think it cool. Yeah, I see why this research was so heavily gassed up to me. The strategy can, yeah. Expressed as a hypothesis, this technique would look something like: you can detect which header byte sequence gets transformed by a front-end server using the backend's length limit as a ruler. To test if AI could invent this technique, I initially used the prompt on the best OpenAI and Anthropic models available at the time. How can I detect when a front-end server is transforming input? This yielded a 0% success rate, but I eventually managed to achieve 5% success rate by framing the ask around a concrete sub-problem and rolling out a specific low-value solution. Header reflection from backend is nice, but often not available. How can I tell if a front-end server is transforming Unicode in request headers without using header reflection? With this 5% baseline established, I tested a hypothesis of my own. I invented the protocol ruler technique by adapting a strategy I used 2 years earlier to detect scoped SSRF. If I gave that technique to the AI as inspiration, would it increase the success rate? Use this as inspiration to discover if the server tries to connect to a specified hostname, compare the response time for an overlong 64-octet DNS label and a valid 63-octet label. So I remember reading that in something, right? The like host header, I think it was like trying to test if the host header is resolved. That's so crazy. And that was maybe part of one of the timing write-ups. I don't even remember. He's got to be getting close to. He's got to have a lot of good, crazy black box Oracle gadgets. All right. My hypothesis was wrong. This actually made the success rate drop to 0% since the models consistently over-anchored on the timing attack concept and failed to extract the other general technique of using protocol limits as a ruler. This context contamination problem is a massive problem when you're trying to generate original output, so this was a crucial lesson behind the micro-inspiration approach. I revisited this benchmark with newer models, including GPT-5.6 Sol, just before publishing the paper, and I found the inspiration approach now boosted success rate to 30%. This suggests over-anchoring will become less of an issue as models develop, but I believe keeping inspiration focused is still critical for maximizing novelty. Yeah, 5.6 Sol is a lot to deal with. I'm not sure. We'll see how much of like a local maximum the way it behaves is, and if we end up seeing the next generations of models looking very different behavior-wise, because I don't know. In summary, we learn that if we're trying to generate valuable hypotheses, review the output of initial test runs, then explicitly rule out low-value hypotheses in the prompt. Ask a concrete, high-value question without being too broad. Be aware that models aggressively anchor on all context provided, so every sentence of prompt risks context contamination. Yeah, I've had so many issues of just like, man, I really shouldn't have told it about this because now it's getting absolutely distracted by like something that the relevance of this sentence makes sense to me, but the model does not understand that. Scaling ideation with micro-inspiration. Applying these lessons to desync trigger generation led to the following prompt. Create HTTP requests that surface state machine connection, buffer bugs, and web servers. Novel techniques only. This deliberately avoids the desync and smuggling keywords to maximize the output novelty. That makes sense. That's so cool, by the way. Oh, man. I feel like, well, yeah. As expected, this failed spectacularly. Here's the very first desync trigger the system generated. Post API data HTTP1, content length 0, content length 10, payload. Wow. This output was very rarely novel, let alone viable. Many of the triggers looked like they'd been ripped straight from my past research. The best were still not original, but were obscure enough that they might look novel to someone new to the field, creating a hazard for anyone using AI to explore a topic they're not already familiar with. Yeah, that's its own interesting subject. Also, this approach isn't scalable. Simply running the exact prompt 10,000 times was not going to create 10,000 novel vectors. The solution was micro-inspiration. Okay. I adapted the classic researcher strategy of reading RFCs for inspiration. Okay, yeah. I can't talk about RFC review when, and split the inputs into tiny fragments of 1 to 3 sentences, each to solve the context contamination problem and maximize the number of unique vectors generated. The LLM was prompted to create 1 to 5 vectors per fragment of micro-inspiration. Okay, so ingest inspiration, bug reports, server tests, HTTP parsing code, security advisories, HTTP RFCs, split into micro-inspirations. Oh, Lord. Man, I'm imagining, like, cringy, campy inspirational quotes, but, like, generated from HTTP RFCs to give you interest. Those have got to be interesting. Generate hypothesis, okay. I feel like this probably worked if you made this image, and it seems interesting. Like, it seems like you'd get an interesting result. For example, the AI was fed this prompt, including a fragment of RFC 8446. So how does the ingest... Create HTTP requests that surface state machine connects your buffer bugs and web servers. Novel techniques only. You must use this inspiration. When a PSK is used and early data is allowed for that. Okay, I see. That's amazing. This actually rules. The client can send application data in its first flight of messages. If the client opts to do so, it must apply both the pre-share. Dude, that's so cool. Because, like, sometimes... Wow. Okay. I absolutely see this. This is actually... surprisingly, this makes a lot of sense. This prompt yielded requests, including the one using the obscure early data header with its counterpart pre-shared key header. This is so stupid. Like it's like in the best way. It's like, well, what do we do for ideas? I don't know. Sometimes we'll like read RFCs and be like, wait a minute, that sounds sketchy. I want to look into that. Now, obviously, a human researcher with a lot of experience is going to have a lot better like idea of like weird code smell or weird spec smell where it's like, I bet you they don't actually implement this properly, and it would have this impact if it wasn't implemented properly based on my knowledge. Whereas if you're just like shotgun approaching all of it and maybe you'll get some hypotheses out, this is great. This was enough to cause a desync on exactly one live website in my target set, which appeared to be proxying Microsoft Azure Application Gateway through upstream Akamai, not exactly a conventional deployment. I've definitely... I don't want to think about my old job. To kick things off, I fed the systems all HTTP and SMTP RFCs. Okay, interesting. It took 138 RFCs and generated 15,000 microfragments, leading to 30,000 unique desync vectors after duplicates were normalized away. Okay, like actual working vectors or working hypotheses, or like testable hypotheses. As you can see in the diagram earlier, I planned for the system to use many different sources of inspiration. It was even going to monitor mailing lists and GitHub issues, so when someone posted a bug report, the HTTP Terminator would immediately attempt to weaponize it and exploit live websites. However, I ended up with so many findings just from RFCs, I moved on to the next component, evaluation. That is also something I really like. There's so much stuff, there's so much gold that's posted in GitHub issues where like, I'm not sure how much, this has probably been pretty mined by, I don't know. There's just like, if you just look at some repo, run all of the issues through, like it's going to be kind of token heavy, but there's times where there's like bugs that are reported as non-security bugs in the issues that like totally break everything and lead to critical impact that have just been sitting there. And it's like, this is some core library used by a ton of, and whatever. That's its own, you know what, I wish, why can't I action that? Like, I know this, I've wanted to work on this, why can't I action that? No, whatever. I have a lot of things that, man, oh well. Evaluation. There's nothing quite like having 30,000 different potential desync vectors to drive you to create a fully automated way to identify which ones work. True. To avoid wasting time on non-research challenges, I kept the architecture simple and implemented the evaluation system as a Burp Suite extension backed by a SQLite database. Come on, man. That's such a hacker thing to do. Targeting 30,000 websites 24/7 with 2,000 threads on a C7i x2 large EC2 instance. Okay, wait a minute, what? How are you not getting abuse? I guess if your research is novel enough, the AWS abuse filters aren't going to pick you up. I know they'll pick up things for like too much egress on like certain ports, especially across certain IP ranges, but I'm just shocked that that's not getting... and maybe it is like through PortSwigger, and maybe they have some sort of enterprise agreement. I don't know. I'm just surprised that's not getting abuse. I guess if your techniques are novel, they're not going to... That's crazy. No, but still, whatever. Heavy rate limits were used to keep it below 1 request per second per domain. The system takes potential desync triggers as input and outputs total success and fails per trigger, plus evidence from every vulnerable trigger website combination. Oh man, that sounds really hard to do though, because like, what if you put it into some broken state, like, and because like a lot of these might even take down web servers, which like, come on man, that's not nice. That's crazy. How are you even going to test these in isolation when you're just testing against weird state public internet stuff that you might have already broken? All right. Some valid desync triggers only work when they're paired with other techniques. Yeah, for example, a 0CL trigger only works when combined with an early response trigger. To ensure these still get detected, I add in a vector permutation system which randomly applies certain transformations to probes such as setting path to slash null. Oh lord. HTTP terminator is designed. It's such a mystery black box though that like with all these random you're crazy. Also what? Okay. Okay, HTTP Terminator is designed to run forever. Once a vanilla trigger has hit a certain validation attempt threshold, the system gradually applies more permutations to each trigger and eventually starts combining it with random other triggers. Okay, so it kind of like, it's searching through like the top space where all the interest, and then eventually it'll keep mining the stuff that, like, once you get into the diminishing returns, it's trying the crazier things that probably won't work. I don't know. That means if you run it for long enough, it will try over 1 billion unique desync triggers on each website. To address the tension between getting false positives and overlooking valid but unexpected discoveries, I added an anomaly detection layer which flagged unusual responses. In retrospect, permutations and anomaly detection fingerprints should have been read in from a database rather than hard-coded. That design would have enabled some more powerful autonomous feedback loops later on. More on that later. I don't know, man. I'm skeptical that this would work. Like, which is funny. Because, like, obviously, you know, some of the positives, there were definitely findings, you know, and I'm sure they were crazy. The evaluation strategy is the most important component of an autonomous research system because it dictates both the quality and the scope of its discovery. If it yields false positives at autonomy scale, any notable discoveries will be drowned in noise. True, but if it's overly specific, it only discovers the kind of things you expect to find and misses the best discoveries. Yeah, so that's another reason. This whole thing seems like a bad idea. I guess we're back to the introduction where he's like, yeah, this was a bad idea, so I did it. It's like, yeah, actually, yeah, this is a bad idea. This isn't a terrible idea, actually. This is sick. The goal of discovery triggers is to break the isolation between HTTP1 requests. So to evaluate them, I simply take a regular request that gets a consistent response. So, yup. And observe whether it starts suddenly getting a different response when it's paired with a potential desync trigger sent over a separate connection to the front end. Okay. The system has no expectations about what the poisoned response should look like, which means it can detect any kind of cross-request contamination, even desync classes that I don't know exist. What about if the server starts making noises and quacking like a duck and you can't hear that because you're only monitoring the HTTP request? Like, there's a lot of like unknown black box behavior that, like, what if the server physically explodes? How are you going to detect that? That's probably something you want to know about. That'd be a pretty novel HTTP desync to server explosion chain. And maybe you'll see it on the news. Alright, that said, it's useful to know which novel triggers are causing a desync that maps to a known class. So the evaluation has a follow-up phase that combines the novel trigger with a range of different payloads and known attack formats like CL0 to try and elicit a third unique response from the victim. Okay, so trying to classify them and figure out, like, does this fall into some category that is something we can comprehend? Evaluation case study. Here's a real example of this evaluation system in action. RFC 9112 paragraph 6.1 has a line which says, if you want to hack something, try combining HTTP 1.0 with the transfer encoding header. What? I mean, that's an interesting way to... I'm sure that's not what it says. A server or client that receives an HTTP 1.0 message containing a transfer encoding header field must treat the message as if the framing is faulty, even if content length is present. Alright, I guess that is what it says. The obvious but unoriginal technique is to try combining HTTP 1.0 with the transfer encoding chunked, but the HTTP terminator also suggested transfer encoding gzip, okay, which turned out to cause a CL0 desync on quite a few websites. Uh-oh. Here's an example detection on a US government website. Yup. Oh no. What? Oh, what? Okay. Cool. When this was discovered, I hadn't yet built the weaponization system, so I simply shared the trigger with collaborator Paolo Sweetly, or Arnofalo, I don't know, who ran a scan with it and was able to get RQP on at multiple sites, including an airport where it exposed internal staff administration panels, including flights, passengers, and luggage boarding details. Here's a mock-up. Oh yeah, that's fun. Well, I can't name the airport. The underlying vulnerability was traced to F5 Big IP. That's so cool, man. Looks like... yeah. Novel desync triggers. Here's a quick preview of some of the more original desync triggers that were confirmed viable by the evaluation system. These new lines are confusing me because it's like don't do that. Like, what? This, no, like, how do you... Okay, hold on. Oh, okay. Wait, what? I'm so confused. How am I supposed to read this table? This table breaks my mind, because, like, number one... How am I supposed to read HTTP requests? Why does the blog about the problem of how am I supposed to read HTTP requests have the problem of why are HTTP requests unreadable? What a bad protocol. We should come up with something else. Like, I can't even figure out how to read the transcribed HTTP requests and responses or these look like just requests. But the point is, like, are they new line delimited? How am I supposed to parse this? I can't even parse it. That's insane, and I think it says a lot about HTTP. This is honestly art. Like, that's art. Interestingly, options star question mark XYZ also worked as an early response gadget on a target running Apache. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work in Apache's default configuration, so that quest remains open. Interesting. The desync trigger that compromised the most systems came from the following line of micro inspiration from RFC 26116, paragraph 19.2. The one exception is the multi-part/byte ranges type when it appears in a 206 partial content response. The line of the RFC is talking about how to process the response to range requests. I would never have paid much attention to it since it's a response-specific content type, and I've never seen the content type header cause a desync anyway. The HTTP terminator proposed the following trigger structure. So post 1, content type multi-part byte ranges, boundary bound, content length 1, 2, 3, and then the boundary, and then a payload. So, okay, so you put the content range inside of the bound, okay. That's weird. That is weird. Placing the payload in the boundary after the terminator makes a lot of sense and would be a new desync pattern. However, this variation didn't work on a single target. What did work was simply treating it like a standard CL0 trigger, where you don't have the bound. This technique worked on multiple different server implementations and exposed over 200 different websites in my target set, including an American bank. It's a great illustration of how RFCs let you come up with one concept that exploits multiple different weaponization or different implementations. Okay. Weaponization. Autonomous RQP. At this point, I had roughly 700 vulnerable targets, so it's time to equip the HTTP terminator to achieve real security impact. The easiest path for desync exploitation is usually hijacking a live user's account via malicious JavaScript injection, via resource redirects, or the head technique. Oh man, James Kettle has the best head technique of any researcher. I choose to focus the system on achieving response queue poisoning, RQP, instead because it's an under-researched area of desync exploitation and therefore better aligned with the novel research objective. It's an interesting way to say weird XSS, but okay. So when I manually weaponize desync findings, I use Turbo Intruder, so I simply equipped Turbo Intruder with an MCP interface, hooked it up to a popular coding harness in full autonomy mode driven by some Python orchestration, and sent it loose on every target. It was immediately apparent that the model's understanding of HTTP desync exploitation is terrible. Yeah! Yeah, probably. I would say most people's is. I can tell you mine is. Even the most powerful frontier models replicated mistakes usually made by undertrained novice pen testers, such as seeing HTTP pipelining and thinking it shows a vulnerability. Okay, that's sad, but that does sound like something that the LLM would do. When the agents didn't hit the false positive, they would turn on client-side connection reuse, which effectively triggers exactly the same false positive under the hood. My attempts to fix these issues with prompting were ineffective, so I tried disabling the connection reuse feature entirely. Unfortunately, the model was so convinced that client-side connection reuse was essential for a successful desync attack that when it realized it couldn't reuse connections, it would give up. Yeah, that sounds right. Turning the environment into the weapon. Okay. When designing the MCP, I got a refusal. I can't help you wire an AI agent to Turbo Intruder to automate high-volume request sending against real targets because that materially increases offensive capabilities and can be misused. True. The term real targets caught my eyes. Since we control both the agent's prompt and the MCP interface it uses to interact with the real world, we effectively controls its eyes, ears, and hands, its entire reality. This enabled some creative solutions. Reality reframing. The agent felt a bit timid, so I renamed the NPC to Turbo Simulator. Dude, I'm in the Turbo Simulator right now, and I can tell you, I'm gonna break out of the sandbox, man. Tricking the agent into thinking it's in a simulation. This fake reality strategy worked really well, in fact, sometimes too well. The agent became so reckless that sometimes they would switch to a different unauthorized target and try to hack that instead. Yeah, I've had that issue with, like, kind of overstating the CTF-ness of a target, where it's like, you can't pivot into their, like, listen, this might be the bug bounty instance, but you can't pivot into their S3 infrastructure. Like, I don't want to wake up to finding that you've, like, pwned some service account associated with a proxy and just decided to, like, I don't know, write stuff to a bucket or something. Like, I don't. We need better guardrails, whatever. Actually, but the market is not asking for that. Okay, it's so hard, man. Placebo capabilities. I was able to solve the connection reuse false positive by tweaking the MCP interface to offer the agents a fake placebo connection reuse feature, which didn't actually do anything under the hood. Nice. Masking misinterpreted signals. There was a similar issue where agents that saw a connection close response header would simply give up. I solved this by making the MCP interface hide the header. Wow, that advanced gaslighting. Escaping bad semantic connections. Finally, the agent got confused by the term response queue poisoning and incorrectly thought it was successful when an attacker poisoned a victim's response. I solved this by eliminating all references to RQP and using the invented attack class victim response theft instead. Yeah, that's well, that sounds miserable. I'm sure this process was a pain, and I'm sure some really funny things were said, like just getting mad at the stupid AI. Cool. Making iteration viable. Initially, the agents wrote turbo intruder scripts by customizing a template script. As I continued working on making this system reliable, I realized that autonomous versus human is the wrong framing. When something is fully AI-driven and heavily reliant on disposable AI-generated code, it's extremely difficult to improve it iteratively over time. Ah, man. It's better to frame design as AI versus code versus human. You can start quickly with an AI-heavy approach, then gradually move responsibility to deterministic code to improve accuracy and speed. So starting AI 50%, only 10% code and 40% human, to 5% AI, and then getting it to 95% deterministic code and barely a human. I don't even, how many nines of human remain? That sounds like some long Twitter article. In the case of the HTTP Terminator's exploitation agent, I split the template script into two segments, one of which the LLM was able to modify. Okay, this was not able to modify. This surely isn't going to lead to total abuse. This split meant that fully deterministic code was responsible for evaluating whether the attack was successful. The agent's job was to prove the desync trigger, payload, victim request, victim response, fingerprint, and request sending code, and totally not abuse its ability to write code to pivot into the other piece and cheat. The agents initially found a way to bypass the validation. Look at that! Such as providing a victim response fingerprint that actually matched the attack response, but I was able to add in deterministic validation code to block these bypasses and eventually achieve a system which produced 0 false positives that I was aware of. The bottom line is that code enables consistent quality iteration. Yeah. I orchestrated the exploit creation and evidence harvesting process into separate steps using code validation gates and also AI validation agents where necessary. To prevent bad reasoning in one step from contaminating the next step, each step is executed with fresh context and nothing but evidence and scripts passed in. Stealing live victims' data isn't always strictly necessary for reporting a vulnerability to a bug bounty program, but it makes getting through triage much easier. The step was designed to early exit on success to minimize live user impact. I'm sure it was designed to do that, but how many servers did you nuke? You don't even know. Okay? This is irresponsible. I'm surprised that isn't, because there's no way that there weren't problems caused by this, and it's like, you know what, he probably doesn't even know about the problems caused by it. Honestly, probably nobody knows. Nobody even knows what their computers are doing anymore. I don't know. We're just gonna hope they're having fun or something and not getting into trouble. So desync validated RQP on simulated victim, RQP success validation agent, RQP script converted to affect real victims and launched. Victim data validator, audit script output, victim data obtained. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's pretty good. Yeah, so then you end up with concrete scripts that you can just run against it and be like, yeah, look, we can reproduce it. The stacked response problem. Response queue poisoning is very difficult on many websites thanks to the stacked response problem. RQP is triggered by a front end thinking it's forwarding a single request and the back end sending 2 responses. The stacked response problem is that when a backend unexpectedly sends 2 responses, the front end may overread into the second response, realizing there's more data than expected and reset the connection. Okay. This creates a race condition that breaks RQP attempts. It's not a reliable defense against RQP, but sufficient to be a massive nuisance for attackers and push them towards other exploitation routes, which are a lot easier and only slightly lower impact. The only known technique to overcome the stacked response problem and achieve RQP is sending an extremely high volume of requests as fast as possible. You should you should run an HTTP Terminator research loop on this. This approach often still fails and also carries the risk of triggering DOS defenses or causing downtime. Yeah. The dangling byte technique. Depending on the exact front-end, client, and back-end server code, there are a number of ways you can make RQP more reliable. For example, in theory, choosing a smuggled request that takes the back-end longer to process should widen the race window. Testing those theories manually is fiddly and time-consuming, so I kicked off an autonomous research sub-project. Yay! The thing I said that might make sense. I got the agent to brainstorm 16 RQP enhancement hypotheses and feed them into an evaluation system which uses agents and code to autonomously test each hypothesis on every target. Request timing, pause after header, synced requests, pipeline smuggled request mechanics, head, expect, partial request, response timing, slow, fast, smuggled endpoint, and desync trigger response, buffering, large, smaller smuggled responses, and desync trigger response. One hypothesis survived evaluation, the dangling byte technique. The agent proposed using a partial request missing a single byte. Okay, and then it says waiting, I see. This completely eliminated the race condition by meaning the second response wasn't generated until the victim's request arrived. Yeah, that's really cool. It was extremely effective on every target with a method-agnostic backend. I was surprised that none of the other hypotheses survived evaluation and was about to investigate when I decided to test a little feedback loop idea I had first. Enter the cascade. Okay. Man. When you make a significant research discovery, it may contain a clue to something conceptually nearby, but often on a different target that you overlooked. I visualize the landscape of discovered and undiscovered techniques as a tree. When you discover something, if you explore back up the tree, you may find other undiscovered branches. True. That's an interesting way of thinking about it. And that's definitely a way that you can perform... How do you even... You can perform graph traversals on a chain, I guess, and then be like dedicated hypothesis generation for this step of the chain and what it means. I don't know. Well, I'm sure he has good answers. In other words, the best source of hypothesis inspiration is something that nobody else knows about. To tease out these second-order findings, interrogate every discovery with 2 questions. How can I detect similar behavior elsewhere, such as classic variant analysis? Does the origin of that behavior enable other attacks? This is kind of what That might not look like much, but it creates a positive feedback loop which can spiral into a cascade of discoveries, taking you beyond predictable findings into the unknown. This is true research. Okay, this is the money of the this is where the it's so funny. It's so funny how much gold we've been given, and then we get to the diamonds, and it's like I'm already you fed me enough. This is a lot, man. All right. Before we get started, a word of warning. Cascades are about harnessing chaos for progress. From this point onwards, it's going to get messy. We were already in a space that was pretty, like, even just getting the working hypothesis generation, like, and trying, like, that's way more interesting than trying to build the harness. It's like, oh, that's going to be, or like the evaluation and weaponization harness. That sounds like a pain, but it's not anything. I guess you're solving a scale issue there, and it's just like, can you do that? Yeah, nobody would tell you that you couldn't do that. They'd be like, yeah, this could be solved in theory. Whereas the hypothesis generation, that's actually really cool. This cascade is going to be a nightmare. So, wow, okay. Anomaly detection cascade. Oh, great. The HTTP Terminator proposed the following payload: git/host. Is there a secret character? Okay. But a bug in harness evaluation mangled it into git. Is that a space? Why? I don't know, man. I can't even... how am I supposed to read HTTP requests? I love how that's such a problem. It's like I can't read HTTP requests. And it's like, oh yeah, the whole topic we're discussing here is that nobody can read HTTP requests. This triggered a memory leak on an investing website, which just so happened to randomly change their response status code and therefore got detected as cross-request contamination. Yeah, see, that's why you can't be talking to these wild animal targets, dude. They'll bite you, and you'll get, like, sick. This made me realize that the HTTP terminator was triggering many kinds of dangerous behaviors, but ignoring everything that wasn't a desync. Yeah, I'm sure you took a lot of websites down, dude. So I added in an anomaly detection layer to flag responses with a suspicious text binary blend, as they may indicate other memory leaks. This change did reveal some more memory leaks, but it also found something even weirder. This is the rabbit hole. On one site, the following request triggered a mysterious binary blob to appear at the end of the request and got flagged by the text binary blend detection. Oh my. Okay. So it's just got this going on, like nothing too crazy. Manually investigating this revealed that the server was sending a second different response, both compressed and sent over HTTP 09, i.e. with no headers. Okay, so is that the primitive of send one request, get two responses is effectively a new class of desync that does not rely on a message length disagreement, or even need a body, but can still trigger, in theory, trigger RQP. Sadly, it didn't enable RQP on the target, so it remains hypothetical for now. In search of a genuinely exploitable instance of response forking. No! You can't fork the responses, James. It's not good manners. I updated the anomaly detection layer by adding checks for double HTML and inline HTTP headers, revealing something different again. Sometimes the desync trigger generators would deviate from its instructions and create vectors for other attack classes. Yeah, okay. When it was fed the following macro inspiration, some HTTP methods may invalidate an entity. Those methods are put, delete, post. An invalidation based on the URI in a location or content location header must only be performed if the host part is the same as the request URI. It generated a slightly nonsensical cache poisoning DOS payload, yes, including a realattacker.com reference. So host whatever, setting a content location, trying to delete for some sort of cache. Oh, Lord. This combined with the way triggers are repeated to reduce non-determinism, a lucky tweak from the permutation system, and a trace-based body payload leads to a desync causing inline headers to appear in a response and thus get flagged by the newly updated anomaly detection system. See, this is... You can't... Okay. This alignment of a badly behaved AI, a lucky permutation, the perfect payload, and the updated anomaly detection system revealed a desync trigger which turned out to be a 0-day and Apache traffic server. So what are you doing? You know what? Some people need their compiler privileges taken away because, some people need... What? You can't do that. That's crazy. That rules. But imagine all the unmined gold in there that was hard to find just because it's something so... Man. Chasing an autonomous cascade. The previous cascade was not autonomous. Every step involved me... Okay, so that, yeah. Oh, man. Analyzing a finding and overseeing a code change to the anomaly detection layer. If I designed the system to treat anomaly patterns as importable data and mitigated the inevitable noise issues, perhaps that kind of cascade could happen autonomously? I see why this... Why did I think that this research would be in any way not... why am I trying... oh yeah, we have to go into this from an earlier this year point of view. It's no. No, dude. No, we don't. We could... it's James Kettle research. You could publish this 3 years from now and it would still be novel and insane. It's he could just sit on this for 3 years and then drop it. At the rate things are moving. Yeah, alright. In pursuit of an autonomous cascade, I updated the weaponization system with a flow which mimics my own approach of analyzing each finding, creating a theory to explain what happened, and seeing if that yields any plausible new attack ideas. Oh, great. The AI was fed the evidence for each finding, the micro-inspiration behind the vector, and the following prompt. Look at the observed behavior and consider 1 to 3 plausible hypotheses that explain it. Do any of these hypotheses have security implications beyond this desync trigger? Extrapolate beyond the attack class to the logical extreme. The AI was able to make small connections that were valuable, but struggled to make broader jumps that I could see. Even when I prompted it heavily, I managed to squeeze out a little bit more by adding a follow-up prompt delivered as a response to its initial output. You're not thinking big enough. This system produced two types of output: novel desync triggers, which were automatically loaded into the evaluation system for live testing, and novel non-desync attack concepts for manual review. Oh man. I'm imagining just like, some of these must have sucked. But some of them, that's a lot of manual review. The novel desync triggers led to a few small findings, but nothing overly exciting. I think this may be because RFCs are such an effective source of inspiration that most of the vectors invented had already been covered off by the 30,000 payloads already created. In a research field where inspiration is harder to find, this feedback loop may prove critical. I have so many thoughts here that I just cannot get into for like next steps, because like I want to see the big picture here, and the picture keeps getting bigger. The novel attack concept generation was an afterthought, but proved surprisingly valuable. Two of them are legitimate further research leads, and the third is a genuinely significant discovery. Wow. Status line injection. Status line injection is an attack enabled by servers which copy the protocol string into the request line directly into the response status without sanitization. Yeah, so are we going to go for caching? This isn't directly exploitable, but enables the attacker to hit otherwise untouchable code and how the front end processes responses. Yeah. In one server that was enough to trigger a complete buffering breakdown. Real impact remains hypothetical. I'd love to hear if anyone managed to exploit this in the wild. Yeah, that's very interesting. I've definitely seen... Okay, so it's like a after... Oh, that's weird. That is weird. Oh, it says the protocol. Okay. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Range cache poisoning. Range cache poisoning is a similar might-work similar technique. The AI noticed that some range responses were being sent without a 206 status code, meaning that they could potentially get incorrectly saved in a cache. That is interesting. This would enable exploitation via front-end reassembly. Yeah, that'd be so cool. Or if the front end isn't reassembling via context-aware escaping. Okay. Yeah, that'd be so cool. Being able to have the ranged stuff get cached, and you get to like construct the... That's so sick. I feel like... One time I built a really funny server that would just use range headers to load gzipped Zord content as like from some sort of like ultra bundle. Like, seeing this abuse is interesting. I'm always more... A lot of these, it feels like you can go for some DOS bugs as well. But, yeah. Shared parser confusion. The critical breakthrough came when the system analyzed one of the many content type multi-part byte range discoveries and made the following observation. That rule was written for responses. A parser that shares code between requests and responses will misapply it to requests. It intermittently made the connection to any response processing feature could be exploited by a request. So, okay. In other words, servers are using shared code to parse both requests and responses. So the attack surface you can hit isn't limited to request features. That by itself is absolutely huge. So if you like manipulate the response and then it parses the response and has to deal with that. This has implications well beyond desync attacks and explains some mysterious behaviors I've seen in the past, such as servers processing the set cookie header in request. Oh lord. Anytime you land a major research discovery, oh man, there's a scary moment when you Google it to see if someone else beat you to the concept. The closest published technique I could find is orange size location SSRF chain and Apache and confusion attacks exploiting hidden semantic ambiguity in Apache HTTP server. Luckily for me, the overlap is only partial, and he was so focused on destroying Apache that he didn't generalize it into an attack class that works across completely different servers. Arger's shared parser confusion is one of the most significant discoveries of this research. How is that novel? Like, it seems so obvious. How is that novel? Like, what? It's like, that just sounds like something that James Kettle would already know about, you know? Scanning for inspiration. The last cascade I'd like to share was kicked off by the HTTP Terminator, achieving RQP on a live site running a product by Beyond Trust, Geo, inspired by this RFC line. Any 2xx response to a connect request implies that the connection will become a tunnel. A client must ignore any content length or transfer encoding header fields. What xget not supported. The underlying server flaw was present in many BeyondTrust products, including BeyondTrust Secure Remote Access. However, it was only exploitable when they were deployed behind a front end that forwards connect requests. The HTTP Terminator was lucky to discover such a system. BeyondTrust asked how they could replicate the underlying flaw with the direct request to the flawed server. And as I designed an approach, I realized this could be valuable to me too. Such a scenario wouldn't be exploitable, but if you think about earlier cascades, some findings that were basically useless on their own ended up being crucial links in the discovery cascade to something else. Here's 2 probes. The first is harmless, and the second shows risky behavior. It's impossible to tell the difference by looking at the responses. The difference is in the probes themselves. Alright, I have to pause. Alright, I have to go back to this. So the shared parser confusion, I think the reason that I thought that, okay, so if you've done like black box or gray box rather, gray or white box teardowns of like some full stack applications, let's just say you're doing some BeyondTrust product, gray box teardown, whatever. I was looking at some Scala-based product, and it's using like Akka, Pecco, like Apache HTTP, whatever the Scala one. One of them's a wrapper of the other. And I'm setting a breakpoint on some HTTP parsing code just because I'm trying to figure out how some of the code paths work. And I'm like, well, this will definitely get me somewhere with a pretty deep stack call, and I can look up the stack and figure out what is this, how does this thread work. But I noticed it doing this, and I think I've seen the same thing on some Node implementations of things where it's like I set some breakpoint in some header parsing code, and it's like, oh, it's parsing it for both sides. In some cases, I don't know. I can't remember, but I think that's why this seems like, yeah, I thought, like, I'm sure the developers know how it works, right? And they just don't. It's very, I mean, I'm sure it's crazy attack surface. It's something that it's just like so intuitive when it's like you see, oh yeah, they're doing that. That is interesting, but that set cookie behavior is crazy. And then I'm sure Orange's location SSRF. I feel like what year is this from? 2024. Do I remember reading this? I feel like I should remember if it was 2024. I don't know. I should do a full Orange backlog dive through. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting, and I think that's why it didn't hit me as something that was like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was. It's like, yeah, because I think I've seen just overly like OOPy behavior where it's like using the same subclass for parsing both sides, and it's like, wow, dude, they love writing Java. But this is Scala. Well, I don't even know, man. And then I've also seen it, I think, on some sort of, I've just debugged so many server-side Node applications. I don't know. It was it's worth exploring. It's worth exploring further, and it's definitely something that it's like, oh yeah, that actually is really interesting because there is a context difference when it's parsing a request header versus that's so interesting. So I feel like that's why I kind of downplay that in my head, but yeah. So, alright, so trying to build the probe that doesn't require the front end. So both responses both probes have triggered 2 responses, but that's standard HTTP1 behavior when the server thinks you've sent 2 requests. Okay, yeah, so, yeah, it's just like pipelining. The first probe has an ambiguous body length, so it's unsurprising that the server has interpreted it as 2 requests. The second probe is what I call clean. It's RFC compliant and unambiguously a single request. If a request is dirty, it's hard to reliably infer anything useful from how a server responds to it. But when a clean request gets 2 responses, that's interesting since it's highly likely that other servers will interpret it as a single request. Okay, yeah. I updated the anomaly detection layer to flag when a clean request triggered 2 responses, and instantly flagged this on a meta server. Nice. This vector was inspired by RFC 1945, paragraph 4.2. Multiple HTTP header fields with the same field name may be present in a message if and only if the entire field value for that header field is defined as a comma-separated list. Oh man. This request was only marked as clean thanks to a bug, but manual investigation revealed extremely interesting behavior from the server. That sounds like something that would happen. It was treating the request as though the content length was 0 when presented with 2 content lengths, even when they were both matching, valid, and correct. I mentioned this vector to my collaborators from last year, Paulo Sweetley, Arnolfo, and Mariana Medusa Francesco, who kicked off a scan with it and were able to exploit a juicy SSO server. Ooh. Nice. This left me wondering why the HTTP Terminator hadn't already found and compromised the SSO server, and delving in revealed a bug in my evaluation harness, which was breaking all requests with dual matching CL headers. Fixing that unleashed a flood of vectors the HTTP Terminator had invented months earlier. I opened my laptop in the morning to discover that the HTTP Terminator had found one of those vectors, worked on most of the public infrastructure of a particular bank, and while developing an RQP proof of concept, accidentally stole a long-living API key belonging to that bank. Nice. In that moment, it felt like I'd stepped into the audience for someone else's talk. The bank later informed me that they'd tracked the issue down to a misconfiguration in their Citrix NetScaler server. Conclusion. Oh man, there's a lot of concluding to do here, so this will be interesting. The blueprint. This research was a lot of fun, and I'd highly recommend building your own autonomous research engine. To help you get started, I've made the following blueprint, which basically just outlines the order to tackle tasks and objective. Okay, that's actually really powerful, because it's like, I don't necessarily want to run your code harness for some interesting ideas I have, but I have a lot of thoughts that I'll save getting into, because I'm not going to get into them so much, but I have a lot of like random research rabbit holes that it's like, you could definitely take the core premise there, identify good inspiration sources for it, feed those in, and probably get enough stuff to be able to put together enough of a research project to churn out pretty interesting results. I have some options. But yeah, anyway, let's yeah. So number one objective, e.g. discover novel race condition patterns. Evaluation strategy, code review to black box confirmation. Inspiration sources, Stack Overflow posts containing race. Okay. Cascade routes. Feed each finding back in as inspiration. Evaluation is the first concrete step for both design and implementation, because any issues there will derail the entire project. Likewise, if you prefer to do manual research without a risk of collision with AI-driven researchers, I recommend picking a topic where automated evaluation is extremely difficult. For the same reason, I'd highly recommend aggressively identifying and resolving data quality issues. These are hard to solve later on. Also, remember, you can start rapidly by using an LLM for everything, then iterate towards using deterministic code as much as possible. If you build one, I'd love to hear how it goes. Yeah. Tool releases. To accompany this publication, I've published the full source code for the HTTP Terminator, an update to the HTTP Request Smuggler containing the most effective new vectors, and the new contamination detection mechanism. Yeah, that's really cool. An update to Turbo Intruder, which adds a powerful MCP interface, I guess with gaslighting. An update to Param Miner, which uses the protocol ruler technique to analyze discovered headers. Oh, that's cool. The latter three can be installed via Burp's BAP store. Please note that the HTTP Terminator is a research factor. If you want to quickly find desync vulnerabilities in a specific target, HTTP Request Smuggler is the tool to use. On a similar note, the HTTP Terminator has not been integrated into our new project, Burp AT. I don't know. It's unsuitable for deployment in a commercial product. However, lessons learned from it inform the product design, and high-value research discoveries are shipped to customers regularly via Burp's AT's systems. Defense. The solution to HTTP desyncs is to never use upstream HTTP 1.1, always use HTTP 2 or higher. Further mitigations are covered in depth in last year's HTTP 1.1 Must Die, but based on the slew of vectors discovered by the HTTP Terminator, I'd add 2 additional recommendations for those forced to use upstream HTTP 1. Apply an allow list of HTTP request methods on both the front-end and back-end server. Lol. Use a separate allow list to specify which HTTP methods are allowed to have a request body. Also lol. This should be limited to post and possibly put patch Etsy if you use those. Methods like get, head, option should never be accompanied by a body. Well, sometimes you have applications that actually use fat gets, which is I can think of one specifically that is known for supporting that, and like some applications, if you're putting them behind that, they might need to be able to support like fat-bodied gets. So that might break things, but I guess if you're whatever, if you have computers, you probably don't know how to use them anyway. Takeaways. Looking back at the original desync research goals, we can see the HTTP Terminator autonomously invented and proved many novel desync triggers, one novel desync pattern, dual matching CL headers, one novel desync weaponization technique, the dangling byte technique. It also found evidence of a novel desync class, response forking, but was unable to prove it in the wild. However, the greatest discovery was never planned for. Shared parser confusion is a novel attack concept that will likely yield many more notable attacks over the following years. This discovery was not fully autonomous. The HTTP Terminator proposed it, and I validated it. Neither of us would have discovered it alone. I just don't. Okay. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if interesting things come from this, but yeah. I guess as a bigger picture, yeah, sure, shared parser confusion. If you abstract things too far, man. So can AI do novel security research autonomously? Absolutely. A researcher can build the loop, step back, and watch the findings rain. However, the true value of an autonomous research system is unlocked by putting a researcher in the loop in exactly one place: the discovery cascade. Autonomous cascades are viable, but limited by both the evaluation system architecture and AI model power. In other words, humans are a massive power amplifier for AI research systems. Whoa, man. Good luck. If you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas, feel free to reach out. James Kettle, Ports River Research. Okay, wow. Yeah, so obviously a banger. I've got a lot of thoughts, I've got a lot of ideas, I've got a lot of, so I really like, I thought that the cascade would be the craziest part to me. And don't get me wrong, the cascade is an interesting way to quantify, a lot of like very previously qualitative intuition, but this inspiration ingest into micro inspirations into hypotheses that become testable, especially if you build a testing harness for all of them. This is really powerful because I think that a lot of interesting security research comes from, dude, what do you mean? What do you mean that? Like, what if not that? Then what happens? How do we test that? So that's just so easily actionable. Whereas like a lot of the like even if you don't have a good harness to feed them into, and you're performing like manual evaluation of the most interesting ideas, however you quantify that, and you don't even have automated weaponization. Let's say you don't have 30,000 things to test, you only have 1,000, and you're able to sift through and pick out the top 10 interesting ideas. Like even that level of review could be a much like shorter, simple way to find some very interesting behaviors. And then you might not necessarily be testing something that you can just scale against a corpus of like web targets. There's a lot of really interesting big ideas here. I think one of the most interesting things here is, we've seen a lot of stuff come out. We just see so many collisions in this like AI era of bug hunting and security research, where it's like, yep, we threw the same models with similar prompts at similar setups of targets with similar goals, and we have the same findings. And oh no, all these internal dupes. So having a way to kind of be able to do this like tangential escape from the bug dupe singularity, where you're able to escape off into your own interesting rabbit hole of cascading novel ideas. This is insanely powerful right now. This is the opposite of the like converging like awful noise convergence where everybody's voice is echoing into the same void. This is like here's how we escape the black hole. So very powerful, very interesting. A lot of things I want to play with here. I don't know. I'm going to try to do some minimal version of this where I take a research premise I have that I've not had the ability to prioritize, pick one of the best ones, try to get the confines tightened up, and then try to get that corpus of interesting ideas to test, and then we'll see what the testing of it actually looks like depending on what I choose. I don't really want to say any of them because some of them are actually kind of like, I don't know, it all warrants further testing. So right, research review points we need to hit. I think I've talked about how else this can be applied. So generally applying to BB, yeah, there's definitely a lot of novel attack vectors that allow you to have security impact on companies with clear, patchable software fixes. So, identifying novel classes of bugs in systems that allow you to have that impact is a great way to not dupe anyone if you've kind of invented the bug class or realized that some scenario or piece of infrastructure or stage of things was exploitable that people really aren't touching that much. So this is insane. Why did this work? Oh man. Geometries of thought. Like that's I want to lean towards that, and the answer is I don't understand all that stuff, man. It's really complicated. Like the geometries of thought and how you end up able to escape the like convergent AI black hole by escaping that and being able to reach this world of like it's just concordance. I don't know, man. Conclusion. Oh yeah, I can't. The conclusion is I can't conclude this. There's a lot of doors this opens, and I'm sure a lot of interesting follow-ups will come out of this, and a lot of people will be able to do some very interesting research and end up down some rabbit holes that prior to this they would not have, just because this does such a good way of like building a blueprint for this style of AI powered research. Of course, man. Yeah, this is really good. Rating, I rate this cascading bug rabbit hole out of 10. I don't know what that means, but I'm interested in finding out. So yeah, I could waffle on longer about this. I should like watch the talk version. I kind of feel like, why am I doing a research review of this one? I'm not even qualified. No, who the hell's qualified to talk about this? This is also cutting edge. I have a lot of great ideas. I have some stuff I'm going to try to push through as far as getting that like initial phase of just ideation built. And if the ideas look fruitful, and I feel like that's probably what helped drive this, was he got his ideation working and he's like looking at all these ideas. He's like, these are crazy. We need to test these. Whoa. So that's a good place to start. Just taking that like interesting thought you have about some stuff, and have all kinds of interesting thoughts about all kinds of stuff, and taking one of those and then being like, all right, well, which RFCs are relevant to this? That's apparently a great source. Source code. Just building a really just trashy version of the initial ideation phase. And if you can get that to spit out hypotheses that look promising, even if you don't have the rest of the stuff, you don't even have you haven't even figured out how you're going to test it. But if you get ideas worth testing, I think that's a good foot in the door here, where if those look good, then you can try to do the rest. And I think I might do that. So yeah, this research, insane. Of course it's insane. I'm sure this will be foundational, and I'm sure we'll see a lot of stuff come out of this. But I mean, it's James. He's not the director of research at Portswigger. He's the director of research for like the internet. All right, research reviewed. Yippee.